Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Etheria restart video. So in today's video, guys, we are continuing on with our series of how to build specific characters, right? The very first episode that we did was based on support heroes. We talked about, how to build Plume, how to build some other debuffers, and then also how to build characters that just give your team buffs. And the differences on how to build them, what to prioritize on their gear sets, shells, matrices. And we're doing the same thing today, but with healers. Now, there's some interesting things about healers in this game. Uh, the first one is there's only really like three pure healers in the game where that is their sole purpose. And then there's other characters in the game that do some healing within their abilities, but you could also categorize them as support heroes. But we will touch on them a little bit with some crossover on explanation whenever we get to it. The other thing is what you'll notice in this game in comparison to maybe some other gotcha games in the space is healing in this game doesn't always uh, it doesn't always apply to the character doing the healing's HP. This was a hard thing for me to get over because whenever you come across healers in games, it's usually a big heal based on their HP percentage, where in this game, it could be based on their HP percentage or it could be based on the character that they're healing's HP percentage. And I'll talk about that whenever we dive in. So, when it comes to the pure healers, the three that I'm referencing is Lingluo, Sonia, who's an SR, and then Chiaki. These three characters are the only like pure healers. There are other healers in the game, but they do a bunch of other things, and they might only have just one kind of heal on one of their abilities, where Ling Luo, Sonya, and Chiaki have heals like across the board in their kits. Okay. Mia has a really big, nice heal on her skill 3, but then her other skills are just like shielding and dispelling, turn meter pushback. Nymphonial has a big heal on her skill 2, but everything else is like attack up with immunity and shields. So she's more of a buffer. You have the new character, Mrs. Zumiaya, who has a little bit of a heal on her passive ability, but she does need to purify a debuff to get that heal, so it's not even very consistent. And then you have Fusho, who doesn't have any healing in her kit unless she has this Moonlit Veil ability up. And that's what her whole kit is based around. But once you apply this, then each turn you're going to be getting a heal. So we will talk about those characters a little bit in detail. But I think it's important to reference that at the get-go. So for this example, we're going to be talking about Lingluo. Now, the nice thing about healers in this game is they're going to be very similar to buffers, like I referenced in the prior video with Tsukiyomi, where Tsukiyomi, in comparison to the other support heroes that were like landing debuffs or crowd controlling or dispelling, doesn't really need any kind of effect accuracy, right? This is usually the most demanding stat in the game, I think. Uh, outside of crit rate and crit damage with damage dealers. But when it comes to your healers, they don't really need effect accuracy. There's a couple exceptions to this rule, like Mia. I think she's the only exception because she does also dispel and turn meter pushback. And as we talked about with our support heroes, you do need effect accuracy to make those abilities viable. But if you exclude her, all of the other healers that I mentioned in our little codex there before we jumped in here, they don't need effect accuracy. So you can rule that out. Similar to Tsukiyomi, I was saying that what you really want to prioritize is HP, defense percentage, just the ability to keep your healer around, because the longer they're around, the healthier your team is and the more sustain that you're going to have in fights. So if your healer is very, very frail, they're really not going to do their job. Okay. Now, I had mentioned at the beginning that some healers don't even base their heal on their own stats. And this is also the case on Lingluo. So if you read her ability, she heals allies twice, but you restore 12% of their max HP. So if you build your Lingluo in very high HP, let's say you can get your Lingluo to 60,000 HP, it will not affect the healing ability of this skill. So you don't necessarily even need to build her with HP percentage. And this is important to know, especially for the PvP game modes, where her effectiveness and her heals can still be very, very strong, even if you don't have the ability to stack HP on her. The same thing here. Her heals on her skill 2 is based on the target's max HP. Now, there's other things that make the heal better, right? Um, for each buff the target has, the effectiveness of the heal goes up by 15%, and you can increase this by 45%. So that means if they have 3 buffs on them, this heal is magnified by an additional 40%, and it triggers twice. So you have to pay attention to what makes the healing effects so efficient and where you're going to get the biggest burst of heal. Sometimes it's not always pertaining to the stats of your healer. Same thing here. This heals for 10% of the max HP, extends the buffs of the targets, and then they receive an additional heal. So you want to prioritize putting buffs on your characters to take advantage of Lingluo's heal. In both instances here, you get a bigger heal out of this skill 3. And if they have buffs on them, you're getting a nice heal here while also prolonging the buffs. So it even gives you the ability to use this skill 2 first, knowing that your buffs are still going to be there the next time you come around to your skill 3. Okay? So I wanted to mention that before we actually talked about the gear. So on your right side pieces, knowing that Lingluo does not necessarily need HP, you can be a little bit more choosy on your gear. Now, the examples that we have here, I need you to take with a grain of salt because it's not so much about PvE with Lingluo here as it is with PvP. Like you'll see an attack percentage bonus piece here. It has absolutely nothing to do with Lingluo at all. It's very similar to Tsukiyomi when I was talking about her 2 days ago. Lingluo's speed is the most important thing for me in PvP. Now, I still want some tankiness, but you see my options here on my speed is just not where I need it to be. I have a bunch of other characters built. But when we talk about PvE, you're still going to need speed, right? Because you don't want to get lapped. You don't want the boss to take too many turns. There's also some opportunities in PvE where you do need Lingluo to go before certain side ads or the main boss itself to put up the immunity to make sure that you don't get a debuff, make sure you don't get turn meter pushback. There's a lot of things that you have to account for in this game. So speed's very, very important. And maybe sometimes it even makes sense to go with the highest speed roll you have with a bad main stat just to make sure that you're going before a necessary enemy to get your runs to be clearable, right? But in a perfect setting, the main stats that you're looking for on your right side pieces are HP percentage and defense percentage. When it comes to PvP, a very important main stat piece for healers is going to be effect resistance. This is just as important as effect accuracy for your support heroes and debuffers, as it is for your healers with effect resistance. So this is like in most cases, right? Effect resistance is going to be a very niche main stat. You're not going to be using it on most of your supporters because most of your supporters need effect accuracy. You're not going to be running it on your damage dealers, whether that's bruisers, whether that's cleavers, because they need crit rate, crit damage. The only time effect resistance truly really operates in a like high value position is on healers, and then in some cases cleansers or support heroes like a Doki Doki that is doing like turn meter pushing and cleansing, and that's her main role, which is why you see this effect resistance piece on Doki Doki. So those are the three main pieces where in a perfect world, like here, if I had an HP percentage or defense percentage piece with the amount of speed rolls on here, I would certainly put it on. But because speed is the most important stat for me, I had to choose this attack bonus piece over something that might have had a little bit less speed. I hope that makes sense. So defense percentage, HP percentage, and effect resistance. If you're in PvP, because we already know that Lingluo's heals are not based off of her HP, all she needs to be able to do is heal. So you can put 3 pieces of effect resistance over here. Why is that important? In PvP, it's going to be like almost mandatory that your opponent does everything in their abilities to stop your Lingluo from taking her turn. Because if she takes her turn, she's going to be putting up immunity, and she's going to be cleansing, and she's going to be doing big heals. So if your opponent ends up going before you and they do all of this damage and your team is almost dead, but the Lingluo gets to go, she's going to cleanse your debuffs, she's going to heal you back up, and she's going to put immunity up on your team to make sure that you don't take more debuffs the next go round. This is absolutely devastating to your opponent. So what are they going to do? They're going to try and push her turn meter back. They're going to try and crowd control her. They're going to try and put up defense down to make her more vulnerable to getting killed by your damage dealers before she gets to go. And how you prevent all of those things from taking place is through effect resistance. If you have high effect resistance, your opponent can't push your turn meter back. If you have high effect resistance, your opponent can't crowd control you. She can't be stunned. She can't be slept. Now, remember, you have to compare your effect resistance versus your opponent's effect accuracy. So it's going to come down to a gear check, because your opponents, if they are running debuffers or support heroes, they're going to go all right side pieces of effect resistance. I mean, effect accuracy, remember? So if you have 3 pieces of effect resistance, it's kind of going to cancel each other out. Why that's important is because you're going to be looking for additional effect resistance outside of these right side pieces. So you're going to be looking for it in your matrices. Bloodbath is a matrix set that gives you 18% effect resistance even on 6 matrices, right? So even if you can't put 12 pieces of bloodbath on something, if you can at least get 6, you'll have additional effect resistance. So that's one way. Also in your substats, this is something that you want to look for. So I have some roles over here on the left side pieces. And remember, in the past video, I talked about how left side pieces are much easier to get the necessary substats you want because your main stat never changes. So it's really easy to prioritize specific pieces on the left side, where the right side, you can't be as picky because you're competing with main stats and substats. So on your left side pieces here, you really want to prioritize some effect resistance. And what you need to know is your helmets don't have effect resistance over here, but they still have flat HP, they still have flat defense, and they still have speed. So you want to prioritize some tanky substats on your healers. Okay? Remember, they don't need effect accuracy. All they need is effect res, defense, and HP. I think there's going to be very rare cases where you want to have attack on your healers, but who knows? You can get creative. When it comes to your transistor here, your middle left side piece, this is where effect resistance can be rolled. So the things that you want to prioritize here are speed, HP percentage, flat defense. Remember, you can't get defense percentage on this piece, and effect resistance. So HP, flat defense, speed, and effect resistance is like the perfect substats for healers. Over here, you want defense percentage, flat HP. Same thing here where you couldn't get defense percentage here, but you could get HP percentage. Same thing here with a defense main stat. You can get defense percentage, but not HP percentage. So here you want to prioritize effect resistance instead of effect accuracy, defense percentage, flat HP, and speed. All right. And then we talked about over here HP percentage with effect resistance rolls, speed, defense percentage, or you're going to be going defense percentage with HP percentage rolls, effect resistance rolls, speed rolls, right? And if you have effect resistance as your main stat, like we saw with Doki Doki. Sorry. Here, you're going to want speed, HP percentage, flat HP, defense percentage to just increase your bulkiness. All right. So healers, very, very straightforward. The only couple of heroes out here that base their heal off of their own HP are someone like Sonia. Like on her passive, she heals the lowest HP percentage ally on her passive by 14% of her max HP. That's very important. So for Sonia, this is where if you want to prioritize your healing, you want to make sure that her HP is as high as it can go, where she is different than what we saw with Lingluo. Here, you really want to have HP percentage everywhere. Because if you don't, her heals on her passive are going to feel lackluster. Where on Lingluo, it's much easier for her to prioritize those other two main stat pieces on the right side, defense percentage and effect resistance, because her heals aren't based off of her HP. So Sonya is a little bit harder to build because Sonya is very similar in Lingluo in the fact that your opponent is going to do everything in their power to make sure that Sonya either dies before she goes or she never gets a turn by pushing her back or crowd controlling her. So she still wants effect resistance. But in order to maximize her heals, she also needs to have high HP. So this one's a little bit more difficult to build. Okay, I hope that made sense. Now, when it comes to the type of matrices that you want to prioritize, I cannot stress enough how good Bloodbath is. Bloodbath is such an amazing set, both in PvE and PvP, that if you have the necessary team to farm Aurora, which is where you can acquire Bloodbath, right? You should do it. It's going to make your PvE life way easier for really hard endgame content like anti-sync echoes, like Ember Trek hard, okay? Not everybody has the ability to farm that though. In PvP, you need Bloodbath. You can't really compete unless you have it. The odd thing about Bloodbath is it is a 12-piece set. So that means that if you're utilizing Bloodbath with some of the other matrices that are specialized, like Colossal Guard, Swift Rush, Swift Raid, Swift Smite, that means that you'll only have 6 other or 8 other matrices available to you. So if you want to make your healer fast as well, you're only going to be getting the 8 matrix buff of 20%. Why that's important is your speed substats are going to be a lot more important on your bloodbath pieces because you're going to be sacrificing sustainability with bloodbath, taking less damage. You're going to be sacrificing speed. So if you can get speed substats there, that's ideal. So bloodbath is a matrix that you really want to prioritize building your damage dealers in because it just makes them even tankier. You're already building them with HP percentage, you're already building them with defense percentage, and you already have them in high effect resistance to make sure that they don't have any debuffs like defense down to amplify the damage that's dealt to them. So bloodbath is key. Other main pieces, and then I'll talk about the specialized cores. Swift Rush, you still want your characters to go fast. What's really necessary in endgame PvE is hitting specific speed thresholds. A lot of the bosses ramp up their damage the more turns they get. So you have to keep pace with those bosses. If the bosses take 2 turns to every 1 turn that your team takes, you're going to lose. It doesn't matter how tanky your team is going to be. If you can't keep pace with the boss, eventually he's going to outpace you and kill you. So Swift Rush is another really great piece for you guys to build your characters in. And I'm not saying that if you don't have Bloodbath, you can't run healers. You certainly can, because there's other really good matrices that you can run in PvE. I'm just saying from a PvP perspective, if you're not running your healers in Bloodbath, it's not going to work out for you. So Swift Rush is another great one as a 12-piece set to just have them going faster. The other thing that I need to mention with speed is the more turns they take, the more their cooldowns reduce, right? So you have the ability to loop back around to your big heals. The more turns you take, the more healing that you get to do. So going fast is still really important. Bulwark is a really great 8-piece set for PvP. This allows you a little bit of leniency when it comes to your right side pieces. Remember, I talked about how effect resistance is really important for your healers. In specific cases where your heals aren't based on your healer's max HP. Bulwark gives you immunity at the beginning of the turn. So that means you might not have to build any effect resistance on your character because you have the option to have immunity on your character to prevent them from having turn meter pushback or to have defense down. The thing you have to realize, though, is there are characters in the game that are meant to remove that immunity to then make your healer vulnerable. So it's a give and take. You have to realize, okay, I can be a little more selective on my gear now because I have Bulwark as a possible option on my character. But at the same time, I have to really be aware of characters that remove debuffs. Strive is another great one where after you're attacked, it advances your turn meter by 10%. This is a really nice way to offset speed if you don't have the necessary speed gear. Let's say you have Bloodbath, you have good Bloodbath, and you have good Strive pieces, because both of these pieces are farmed from Aurora. You don't get any speed from these matrices, but what you do get is turn meter advancement, and you get sustain. So if you're able to offset the speed with speed rolls or with your shells, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, then it might be okay to avoid Swift Rush and just prioritize turn meter pushing and sustainability. So Strive is another great set. What else do we got up here? Oh, yeah. And then we have the like HP healing sets. Now, Wellspring is just like Unbreakable, and it's just like Onslaught, where these are okay early game pieces. And Wellspring is going to be like an okay matrix set, even for PvE. It can be an endgame PvE set still. But when it comes to PvP, it's quite worthless. I don't think you should look at it at all. The same thing goes for Cure. Cure is completely kind of worthless when it comes to PvP. You have to prioritize a bunch of other stuff to be competitive there. But for a PvE setting, it's still very, very good. And it can be critical to build some of your healers like Lingluo in this set for Aurora. So don't count this out from a PvE perspective. The same thing with Wellspring, okay? But when it comes to PvP, you should not look there. None of these attack scaling matrices you should worry about. Now, when it comes to the specialized cores, right? The pieces that you can only get from farming Inferno Threshold, you have some decent options here. So Evil Guard is really nice because it does increase your healing effect and it also gives you effect resistance. So if you're building very high effect resistance, you can go like a great kind of build for a healer is Bloodbath with a 6-piece Evil Guard and then an 8-piece Strive, because you're getting the turn meter advance, you have the sustainability, and you're getting additional healing out of your character with the additional effect res. Remember, we talked about finding effect resistance in other areas because the debuffers and dispellers are also going to be building very high effect accuracy. So you need to find every bit of min-maxing you can for your effect res, and Evil Guard gives you that. I will say this is probably in the lower priority of what you want to target when it comes to your specialized cores, because remember, speed is also very, very important. And if you're building your characters in Bloodbath and Strive, you're focusing way, way too heavily on your speed substat rolls because you're not getting speed anywhere in your matrix effects. Okay. Colossal Guard is another nice option. So instead of healing being increased, what you're doing is you're increasing your defense. So you have a little bit more sustainability while also getting the effect resistance from, the other specialized core. But here you're trading off the healing abilities for just more sustain. Swift Raid is a piece that I think you should just prioritize more on damage dealers. These two pieces are pretty interesting though. So Aether Plague gives you a lot more HP, and it does give you some effect accuracy. Now, this is a really nice piece on something like a Mia, right? Where we talked about how she has that one big heal on her skill 3, but then her other abilities are more support. That's where the HP percentage for Mia is really nice, and the effect accuracy is really nice because on her skill 2, she does turn meter pushback and dispelling. And as we talked about, on our prior video, she needs effect accuracy to land those skills. So that's a really nice option there. And then Swift Smite is, again, like another option for Mia, but at the same time, it can be used on any of your healers just because it gives you 15% speed. The effect accuracy in most cases isn't going to do anything for your healer, but the speed itself is worth it to just have this Swift Smite, okay? So those are your matrices. Now, when it comes to your shells, there's 2 main healing shells in the game. The first one is Supernova. This shell is very niche for PvP. I'd say in most cases, you're not going to be using it. But as a beginner shell for PvP, you can certainly put it on your Lingluos. You can certainly put it on your Sonias. You can put it on your Chiakis. You can put it on your Mias. All of those things are going to be okay. It's just not best in slot. Where it is best in slot, though, is on Fusho, right? We talked about her a little bit, but Fusho, whenever she's in this Moonlit Veil, she's pushing her turn meter back. Like she's trying to take as little amount of turns as possible to keep the Moonlit Veil up. So if she has that Supernova Shell on her, Supernova Shell provides you with additional healing for 2 turns. And what's unique about this is because Fusho continues to push her turn meter back herself, the 2 turns of this Supernova just feels like it's infinite, right? So this is a really nice option there. It's also a really great shell to use for Aurora because you get an additional heal over time. Remember, you need heals to break the shield on Aurora. And at the same time, it increases your healing. So it's not based on your HP percentage or anything like that. It's just you increase the amount of healing that you're doing on your skill. So it applies to Lingluo, it applies to Chiaki, it applies to Sonia, no matter what their stats are. And then the other one is Fortissimo. This is, just another really good shell for like end game PvE content, where if your cooldowns on your healers are maybe 1 or 2 turns away, Fortissimo is like storing up the healing that they've done on prior turns and then distributing it again if your characters are low. So it's kind of like an additional healing skill outside of your Animus's turn. So it's a very, very cool, unique ability. As I mentioned on our support heroes as well, the matrices on these pieces are really important. So here you'll see that this shell has Strive, it has Bloodbath, it has Colossal Guard and Evil Guard. So very high effect resistance is a really nice thing if you want to run this shell. But you also have to notice here that this shell does not have Bulwark. So if you didn't want to build your healer in effect res and you wanted to prioritize immunity on them first turn, you can't use this shell. It doesn't have it, where Supernova does. Supernova has Bulwark. So you can build a little more high HP. You can build a little bit more defense percentage on your right side pieces because you could put a Bulwark matrix piece on your healer to make sure that they don't get debuffed or turn meter pushback, giving you a little bit higher probability of getting a turn with your healer. So something to keep in mind. Okay, those are the 2 pure healing shells. Alicorn, another really great shell to put on your healers, similar to what I was talking about the other day with supporters. It has all the right kind of pieces here. It has Strive, Bloodbath, it has Colossal Guard if you want to go a little more effect resistance related, but it also has Swift Smite, so you can increase your speed with this one. The nice thing about Alicorn is you don't need to really build high effect res with Alicorn because you're guaranteed to dispel 3 debuffs. So even if your healer gets a defense down or if they get crowd controlled, if they're fast enough and they go before maybe 1 or 2 of the characters that your opponent has on their team, it's going to dispel those debuffs. You're going to get to take your turn and your effect resistance is going to be increased by 75% for 2 turns. So future turns, they're going to have high effect resistance without prioritizing it on your main stats. So this is a really cool piece. It does not have Bulwark, but you really don't need that whenever you're dispelling the 3 debuffs. So that's cool. Codex of Magic, I do want to reference, even though I think it's very niche, but it does have Strive, it does have Bulwark, and it does have Bloodbath. But something that you'll realize on your healers is sometimes their cooldowns are very high on their big healing abilities. So Codex allows them to do their 2 big healing abilities back to back. This can be a niche kind of setting for your healers, especially if you're using them to counterpick Cleave, where Cleave is going to try and kill you on the first turn, and if they're not successful, they're going to kill you on the second turn. So if you have double counter heals to their double counter Cleave attacks, it is something that's a possibility. I'd say this is very niche though, and you're going to put it on like 1 or 2 specific characters just to counterpick Cleave. But it's still an option. Gigabyte is also another really great shell. It has pretty good matrices on it. It has the Bloodbath, Strive, and Swift Rush. But it also has Aether Plague for the HP percentage and Evil Guard. But the nice thing about this is if you build your healer slow, what ends up happening is if the entire enemy team gets to go before you, what ends up happening is, let's say they go first with their debuffer, right? Their debuffer goes, their attack booster goes, and then their attack damage dealer goes. After 3 actions, what ends up happening is you take this big 35% turn meter boost for your healer. So the fourth person on your opponent's team who's probably trying to cycle back around to the damage dealer is going to get cut in front of their damage dealer is going to get cut in front of because you get a huge turn meter boost. On top of that, you're probably running Bloodbath to take less damage while also running Strive to give you even more turn meter boost. So this is another way of kind of stopping that plan without having a whole lot of speed because turn meter boost is just a straight boost. It doesn't pertain to your speed. It does calculate the difference in your turn meter percentages based on how fast your enemy is. So there is some calculation there, but overall, if your speed is, 200 versus 300, the turn mirror boost is significant. So Gigabyte's a really nice option to kind of offset the speed if you're going with Bloodbath and Strive, where you're just going full tank and you're trying to just loop turns based on your opponent taking turns with every 3 actions. Gigabyte's a fantastic option. Artisan's a little interesting here. It's an okay shell, but I would say it's going to be probably on the lower tier end of where you want to be. Dark Moon isn't something you want to run on your healers. Halloween has a little bit of merit. Again, it has Bulwark, it has Bloodbath, it has Swift Rush, and then it also has Aether Plague and Evil Guard. And if you're able to reduce the skill cooldowns of those high cooldown heals, it does have some merit. But again, it's going to be similar to Artisan or Codex, where it's going to be really, really niche. Lighthouse is fantastic. This is kind of similar to Gigabyte in the case that you can build your healers a little bit lower, and it's going to be to counter cleave because you get a big turn meter boost whenever you take more HP, more than 25%. The interesting interaction here, though, is with Bloodbath because, like I said, most of your healers are going to want to be built in Bloodbath, but they're taking less damage. So if they have Bloodbath, it's going to be harder for you to take 25% max HP in a single hit. This is still really good against like Messiah. Messiah is just a menace for tank heroes. So this is a really nice shell to counter Messiah, even on Bloodbath. So I'd say in most cases, a Gigabyte shell is going to be a little bit better than Lighthouse, but in specific scenarios, Lighthouse is going to be above and beyond better than Gigabyte. Amber is another one where your healers are going to be one of the main targets of attacks because if they end up going, it kind of makes things a little bit harder for your opponent to win. So Amber has Bloodbath, it has Colossal Guard, it has Strive, so you can build very high effect resistance, a very tanky hero, and after they die, they end up getting even a second life per se, right? And because they're tanky, right? Your healers are tanky, they have high HP, they have high defense percentage. It's going to be so hard to kill them the second go round after Amber procs because they go into this ice state where it increases their defense. They can't have any kind of debuffs. They can't be turn meter pushback, and they recover their HP. So this is also, I think, an underrated shell for healers. And then the last one I want to talk about is Reaper Steps. This is a new one, and this is really pertaining to just high effect resistance. This is very similar to Gigabyte, but if you have very, very good effect resistance sub rolls on your left side pieces, this can be a great shell because every time you resist a debuff, you increase the turn meter of your characters by 20%. And this procs 1 time per turn. So every enemy that is trying to land debuffs on you, if they miss, you boost your turn meter by 20%. If they miss again, the next character, 20%. So this is a great option for you to build Bloodbath and Strive, right? So you get the turn meter boost by getting attacked, And then you also get a possible 20% turn meter boost every time you resist. So if you have high confidence in your effect resistance builds, Reaper Steps is best in class. But if you're not as confident in that, I think Gigabyte is a better option. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about that I did not talk about in my first video is the passive effects, right? Now, when it comes to your healing shells, the first passive ability, this is very straightforward. You want HP percentage on your healers. Defense percentage is okay. Flat HP is okay. Sometimes you don't have enough chips or you think it's going to be good enough. That's great. Okay. This is certainly the easiest passive effect to really focus on. You really want the HP percentage on Surge. If you can get 30%, man, it's just going to make a world of difference. On the second passive effect, I would say almost certainly you want to roll for Shadow Dash because remember, you're going to be building your healers in Bloodbath, in Strive, and you're not going to have the speed matrix effects from like a Swift Rush that you will on most of your other characters. So if you can get 20 speed on your shell passive, this is going to make a world of difference. Now, if you're running your healers in speed, your second passive slot opens up a little bit. Okay. You can roll for the vibrancy, get a little bit more healing. That's an okay option, especially on something like Aurora, where you're trying to break the shield and you need a higher percentage of healing ability. That could be an option. You could also roll for Calm for additional effect resistance if you have higher speed, and then you're really prioritizing just cutting in front with high effect resistance. This is something that is an option. But I'd say 90% of the time, you're just worrying about Shadow Dash. And then the third passive slot, when it comes to PvP, there is no mistake that the best option for you here is Insight because it increases your effect resistance by 60% at the highest roll at the very beginning of the match. And remember, I said the debuffers are also going to be trying to stack effect accuracy. So you have to do everything you possibly can to have more effect resistance than their effect accuracy, especially if you're running a shell like Reaper Steps, right? So this is best in slot for PvP. When it comes to PvE, though, I think defensive stance is really, really good as you reduce your damage taken each turn you take with defensive stance if they didn't deal any damage. So healers like Lingluo, healers like Chiaki, healers like Sonia, they're going to be able to get up these 3 stacks really quick, which is 15% less damage. Shadow Guard can be a thing, especially if your healer is the fastest on your team. This is a little bit easier than you would think. So if they're the fastest character on your team and you have a guaranteed 12% reduced damage, this is still a really nice passive roll. And then the safest kind of piece, although it's not as specialized when it comes to a passive, is Dauntless, where it's just raw, less damage taken. So this is really great for PvE. I think this is the best PvE substat roll you can get on the third passive. You know, it's going to help with your Rango Kutsus, your new Chloros, endgame anti-sync echoes, or Ember Trek. So, all right, longer than the other one, but again, I like to go into detail. So hope it helped. And yeah, let me know your comments below. All right, catch you on the next one. See ya.